record. So that very good.
You can
Now,
so that my questions will also come back.
That's what, and you can also raise in between again. On the second question, I will take up the second question. I think that is the whole problem in these discourses that we see. That the fact that these Brahmins are coming, this is not just one person around. There are 500 Brahmins behind him. It is Buddha and his disciples behind him, and Asalayana around 500 Brahmins behind him. Usually, these discourses is not one-to-one. Usually, there are some discourses which happen one-to-one, like Vasetta Sutta. But in other suttas, all the Brahmins sit behind Ambatta, for example. In Ambatta Sutta, all these 500 Brahmins sit behind him. And there's actually a quarrel. So, and all the disciples of the Buddha sit behind him, and then they talk. So it happened in public domain. In public, it is not a private conversation. So that is now what is important, Arun. I think we should recognize that this assertion that Brahmins are a pure people and others are impure, that Sujjanti, that purity is not possible for other castes, only Brahmins are pure, that is the assertion that these people are making. The fact that these people have to make that assertion and enter into a debate means that it was not established. There was still fluidity, what is called fluid, the situation was fluid. That these people were making a claim which was accepted among certain circles, but not accepted among all people. The Shramana tradition was actually a rebellion against this kind of a claim. That the Shramanas were mostly the non-Brahmin preachers, sages. That's why Buddha was called Sakya Muni. They were the saints. And the Samanas, many of them were Shudras. They were, of course, Buddha was a Kshatriya, or Mahavira was a Kshatriya, but there were also of other castes. There were 6 major schools of Samana schools in Buddha's time. Buddha repeatedly engages in discussion with them, right? Purana Kassapa, Ajita Kese Kambali, all these people, and the Jainas themselves. There were 64 Samana schools. There was a Brahmajala Sutta, there was a discourse. So that means there was a different views of society about the caste divisions. And this was, and the Thasil, historians are telling us that whereas this Brahminical social order was already in place in the central and northwestern India, and this was spreading into eastern India. That's the time Buddha was born, and Buddha is rebelling against this. So what was happening was the Brahminical social order that was formally in place in the northwest, and that is present Punjab, and in the north central, that is presently the central UP and Haryana, Delhi, Madhya Pradesh, etc. And it was coming into the eastern parts of India, and that's where the Buddha said, we don't accept this. It is not that it was not there. It was there in the northwest and north central, spreading into the eastern India. That's where Buddha challenged it, saying that this is not really necessary. So the whole idea of intercaste marriages, you see two different models here. In Eastern India, the society was more flexible in terms of intercaste marriages compared to the northwest and north central India. So even after Manusmriti and all that, intercaste marriages were taking place. That's why the Sankara Jatis came. The hybrid Jatis were happening, and Manu tried to prohibit them as far as, and then he gives in the kind of names he gives to all these Sankara people. That
Oh,
means that people were marrying in the sexual relations was happening between these different communities. It's not that they were not happening even in a Brahminical society.
oh,
The mere fact of mentioning of intercaste marriages doesn't mean that the society was flexible. Precisely because it was becoming rigid, they were called intercaste marriages.
oh,
When you say Kshatriya marrying living with a Brahmin woman, or Brahmin man having sex with a Kshatriya woman, or Brahmin man having a sex with a Shudra woman, right? Or a Shudra man having sex and having children with the Brahmin woman, all this from the Chandalas. Chandalas were supposed to be the Shudra man and a Brahmin woman in this Anuloma, Pradiloma type of marriages. The fact that these are mentioned, that they are divided into different castes. And what I think Buddha is saying, that look, don't make these distinctions. They are just mere occupations. The Khattiyas are rulers, Brahmins are priests or teachers or reciters. There are Gahapatis and there are traders, there are agriculturists, and etc. etc. There are all different occupations. And the people born of these marriages between people engaged in different occupations, they're all same. Don't make the distinctions you are making. That's what he's saying. The fact that Brahmins are trying to make those distinctions that time, that trying to ossify these differences. And he was saying that don't do that. So in that sense, I think he was negating the caste system, not the division of people into different occupations again. And he was allowing people to have. He comes from a Khattiya community, and repeatedly in our literature, even in the Jataka stories, we come across saying that the Khattiyas are most scrupulous fellows in terms of intercaste marriages, not the Brahmins. Intercaste marriages were prohibited among Khattiyas. In fact, even the Shakyas married only among themselves. There was a kind of incest among Shakyas. They didn't marry even outside their clan, because they thought that will polluting. Shakyas were considered themselves as a high among Kshatriyas. So that is the level the Kshatriyas have taken. So I think in that sense, Buddha was revolting against a kind of a Brahminical social order, and saying that don't bring this kind of differences here. And so it's not negating a kind of a caste system that was flexible, which allowed intercaste marriages. These examples are only telling Brahmins that you are dividing people into castes, which cannot be sustained, which argument cannot be sustained, because the offspring of these intercaste marriages have no differences. I think that is one thing that I learned from this. A second one on the dialogue, we said, what kind of a dialogue is this? When there is no agreement on the ideal, and then there is a give and take. I think there are two aspects here. Although it is called a dialogue, it is basically a discourse which is given by the Buddha, and he takes it as a kind of a starting point. So it is basically an exposition of one's own doctrine, using the opponent as a kind of a peg. So he has already a well-developed doctrine of his own. He is not prepared to learn from the opponent. I don't think that is the purpose of these discourses. The purpose of discourses is to give an exposition of the doctrine. In all these discourses, not only here, but there are several discourses where opponents are present on dharma, nibbana, on education, on government, on how the king should behave, all these things. There are because all these discourses are dialogues in that sense. Dialogue not in the sense you are saying that where there are two parties which are willing to concede a point of the opponent in case they find it good, in order to promote the ideal at large, which is agreed upon by both the parties. But I think here is what is happening is these are either many of the other discourses, these people come in order to inquire the Buddha what he says about a particular aspect. Or in some places where they go to Buddha in order to challenge him, saying that don't do this. So, or sometimes it's simply a disciple asks Buddha to elaborate a particular point, aspect of his doctrine, and then he elaborates it. So it's more of a preaching, more of a teaching. These discourses are in the form of either you call it preaching or teaching. I think the word which most of the scholars on Buddhism use were teaching. So these are the teachings in plural. Normally we find in literature in plural, the teachings of the Buddha. The discourses or the teachings of the Buddha are where he elaborates his doctrine. Sometimes they are opponents, sometimes they are antagonists, sometimes they are simply inquirers of his doctrine, sometimes they are well-wishers, sometimes they are followers. Many times it's the followers who come and ask him. The kings, merchants, they go to him and say, tell us about this. So this is not, so we have to, as I said, I think earlier, that in order to find out the arguments of the Brahmins, if you want to have a detail, what the Brahmins were arguing outside these discourses, probably we have to go back to this, the other day we were talking of the Shruti texts or Smriti texts, Dharma Shastras and Upanishads and all that. So they will give us the arguments of the Brahmins of the time.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you. But
similarly, the same thing happens, Arun. You see, if you see the Charvaka Lokayata's arguments, you cannot know anything from the Brahminical text except mentioning it as a small peg, and then they elaborate it. They refute the Lokayata Charvaka arguments.
Where is Madhyam Marg, sorry? Where is Buddha's Madhyam Marg in his dialogue?
Madhyam Marg is the one he on the caste question. Yeah, I think if you think of a middle position, he refutes the Brahminical social order, but at the same time he recognizes the inequalities among men by virtue of their conduct and by virtue of their intelligence.
Okay, now I got it. Yeah.
So prajna, for him, there are three cardinal principles of Buddha everywhere, not only in these discourses. It's called Sila, Samadhi, and Prajna. Sila is conduct, Samadhi is concentration, the cultivation, and then Prajna is wisdom. So he says that everybody is capable of these three things. You can be of good conduct, you can also cultivate certain qualities, and you can attain wisdom. But this in these there can be differentiation. There are different levels of it's not that everybody should have the highest conduct. If you reach the highest conduct, then you will become a Brahmin. That's what he says. The person with the highest conduct is a Brahmin. So he defines people in that sense, so he distinguishes people by virtue of their concentration, their cultivation, their conduct, and acquiring the right wisdom. Suprajna, he says, right wisdom. Wisdom also there is just not prajna, but also samyak prajna, the highest wisdom. So in that, I think it's the hierarchy. And that's what he recognizes in the Sangha also. There are Agrasishyas, Mahasishyas, and the levels are different. Everybody is not like bulldozer socialism.
But is there a discourse on Uchadvadis of Buddha's time?
Oh yes. Buddha himself refuted. There is this the several places he rejects the annihilationists. So annihilationists believe that nothing is permanent, and once a person dies, this will get merged with the elements of nature, and there's nothing that remains beyond the death. That is Uchedavada. In English, it is called annihilationism. Right? But Buddha said no, because he thought that Uchedavada has a danger. It will make people immoral. Because when you die, nothing remains beyond your life, then people will do so many bad things. You just enjoy this life and do sex or earn money or kill people and do whatever you want to increase your happiness, and nothing affects you, because once you die, there's nothing beyond this life. So I think that is the reason why he rejected. It's not that he believed in soul and migration of soul, because he rejected migration of soul. He rejected the existence of soul, because the one central cardinal principle of his philosophy is anatta. Anatta, anicca, and dharma. So impermanence, he himself propounded the principle of impermanence, that nothing is constant and things change. But he rejected annihilationism as the extreme of this, and thought that if he agrees to Uchedavada, people would say that all right, we'll do whatever we want and nothing would affect us in the next life, because there is no next life as such. And that's where I think the mysterious element of Punarjanma exists in the Buddha. That's what I think Partho and Pradipta, they were raising this. How can there be rebirth without a soul? What is reborn? So I think that's where he tried to negotiate that treacherous, tricky, slippery ground, and said that if you accept Ucheda, and then the other side is Shashvatavada, eternalism, that the soul is permanent, the death is only, this body ceases, but that the soul remains forever. There is no death for the soul. That's called Shashvatavada. So between Uchedavada and Shashvatavada, he took a middle position. And saying that Uchedavada is wrong, Shashvatavada is wrong.
But did Uchedavadis also reject these functional divisions of labor in society?
That we do not know.
No, okay.
Because the one who talks about Uchedavada during the Buddha's time is the Charvakas. So the Charvakas were saying that nothing remains after death. And whatever life you lead here and now is the life. So, but we don't know what the Charvakas, we have very scant account of the Charvakas, except some places where Charvakas are mentioned by the Upanishadkaras, Charvakas as Uchedavadas. And in some of the accounts where we have the Charvakas speaking about the caste, they denounce it. So the only place where the word Charvaka comes is in Mahabharata, when the Yudhishthira, after the war, he was going for oath taking. What is this ceremony? Taking the crown, the coronation ceremony. Yudhishthira was going to the coronation ceremony, and on the way, the Charvaka stops Yudhishthira and says that, what are you fellow doing? You have killed all your people, and now you want to celebrate this victory and enjoy this state. Then the Brahmins come and and say that this fellow Charvaka is the fellow who doesn't believe in this caste order, who is antisocial, and hence you punish him. And that's how he gets arrested and brought to the court. Then he argues with the Yudhishthira what his belief systems are. That's one place where we come across the Charvaka philosophy. And the second place, I think there are few places where Bruhaspati was considered to be a Charvaka philosopher. So there are certain accounts of Bruhaspati's ideas, and I think there was a lot of, there was some common ground between the Charvakas and the Sankhya and Nyaya Vaiseshika people, because they were also materialists. And there were some differences between the same. Charvakas were not alone in themselves in that sense. There were also certain common overlapping area between Buddhism, Sankhya, because Buddha's philosophy itself is considered to be a Sankhya extension of Sankhya philosophy, because his teachers were Sankhya philosophers. The first philosopher, especially the first guru, Alara Kalama, was a Sankhya. So people say that Buddha took a lot from Sankhya philosophy, which permeated the Upanishads, most of the Upanishads. So in that sense, Charvakas have some common ground, but there is also, Charvakas were highly materialist and, as said, Uchedavadas, Uchedavadins. And Buddha,
in the evolution of distinctions, social distinctions, altogether, Buddha didn't agree with that. Either. Buddha didn't agree with Brahminical order, nor agree with Uchedavadis, because they believe in evolution of distinctions.
Correct. Yeah.
Therefore, there is no rebirth. Because no distinction valid now. The very need for rebirth. The idea of rebirth is
what on rebirth, he talks of only once actually. He says rebirth is like one light lighting the other light. Deepa. One Deepa, you use one Deepa in order to light the other Deepa. So in that sense, that the qualities that you have will be passed on to the next generation. It's not that you will be reborn as such, but the qualities that you have today, you cultivate, that will be transmitted to the next generation of people. So when I am reborn, in the sense that I am reborn in the form of my daughter, or you are reborn in the form of your son, but it is not you actually you are reborn. Certain qualities that you have cultivated or passed on to your son and your daughter. So that is the kind of rebirth, I think, which Buddha was speaking about.
You made that point clear,
yeah.
Okay, so
thank you, Arun, for asking me to speak. Really, I really enjoyed it, and this is a kind of a motivation that makes people to
very, very stimulating for all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you for participating and making us empowered now.
and I hope I will get an opportunity sometime after when I write something on this, so that I can present it to you.
Very nice.
To the group. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Arun. Good night. Bye.